All right, a good Saturday to you. Thanks for finding us here at Fox 26. I'm meteorologist John Dawson. This is your tropical update just for YouTube. Glad you found us. I know we got an international audience that likes to check in here, and we want to hear from you. Leave us a comment below. Let me know where you're checking in from, and let me know, are you happy about this? No tropical activity is expected for the next 7 days. That is, of course, for the Atlantic Basin. So all those folks out there who are in the Caribbean, looking at us, checking in with what's happening, thanks for being there. And yeah, let me know where you are and how excited you are about the fact that we've had a quiet start. I'm going to talk a little bit about that history here with the fact that this is unusual in the recent years. Stress recent years, that this has been a start where we haven't seen an activity. We're basically here to July and we still haven't seen a named storm in the Atlantic. And yeah, we're going to talk about that history for just a little bit. But I do want to point out there is an area of interest over in the Eastern Pacific. That has not been quiet. The Eastern Pacific has had 5 named storms so far. Of course, Eric made landfall last week. And again, maybe even going to see a little bit more activity overall. So if we look at our history books going back to 1851, and we stop this technically at 2021, you'll notice that, yeah, overall our activity is pretty quiet from June to July. But then once we kind of get into August, things begin to really ramp up quite a bit. And then we peak September the 10th. So again, this is sort of more or less our history of what we know from our activity going all the way back to 1851. Obviously, there could be a few storms or more that have been slipped in there that we didn't know about because that was well before the satellite era. Once we've got those satellites up in there, we kind of be able to pick things out a lot easier. So here's what I was talking about as far as that quiet early season. If you look at the last 30 years, that's what we've got here from 91 to 2020, the last 30 years is what the National Weather Service, NWS, always refers to as normal or average, because they always use the most recent 30-year sort of block of time. And the average, if you look at that, would be June 20th when we would first see that named storm. So we look at the average for when we first see a named storm, that would be June 20th. So it's not, all that uncommon to have that in that 30-year block of time. And as a matter of fact, there's been 8 of those 30 years in which we wouldn't see it until at least July or maybe even August. But here's the key, though, for us in sort of our current thinking, our current sort of trend where we find ourselves. We have seen activity before July, in other words, in June, and then sometimes even in May, all the way since 2014. 2014 was the last time that we did not have activity in June or May or even earlier in the year that had waited all the way until July. So in this current trend of 10 years or so, that's why things are sort of feels like it ought to be more active, because it's been 10 years in a row where we've had activity prior to July 1st. And that's just sort of, again, one of those reasons why we feel like maybe things are a little off again. Not really in the bigger sense of things. Quickly, when we look at where we expect to find storms forming in June, and I know we're starting to kind of get to the end of June, but normally along the southeastern coast of the U.S. and out into the Gulf is where our prime location is for a named storm. For a hurricane forming in June, it's got a little bit of an eastern edge of the Gulf where we see that perhaps forming. Not where we're talking about landfalls, not where we're tracking, but where the actual formation starts. So those areas that we're kind of keeping an eye on for something to develop, they would start here and then track somewhere else. Talking about the names, of course, we haven't needed a name here in the Atlantic side of things, but we will look for the first one to be Andrea when it's time to start naming them, and that's going to be at least 7 days or so down the line. It's going to be a while. So when things are quiet, that's when we always want to be thinking about preparedness. So my hurricane gear test is a great way to do that. If you are already on YouTube here, so I'm about to wrap it up. As soon as I'm finished, go to that search bar and just put in meteorologist John Dawson, or you could put hurricane gear test, but eventually you'll end up to the meteorologist John Dawson channel. And then you've got all sorts of resources there to help you think about ways to prepare, specifically your hurricane kit, your supplies, and ways and things that you might be including in that, and just some ideas that you might not have thought about overall. All right, that's going to do it for our tropical update for today. Remember, we're here every day of hurricane season doing this, and so it's Saturday. I'm here. And I work Saturday, Sunday, so that means tomorrow I'll expect to see you back here once again with another update.